Hello, everybody. It's me, Emma. Actually, Emma, if you say it normal, like a normal human being instead of a weirdo. But I'm a weirdo, so whatever. And here comes the boy, Loki. There's actually about 90 views on his baby video. I didn't expect it to do well just because it's so dark. But everybody loves a baby, especially this baby. I mean, he's not a baby anymore. This is a full-grown cat, but he's my baby. And he's a very good boy. Um, I just had a job interview today, so that's why well, I took off my jewelry, but I'm still wearing a fancy top and everything. It is supposed to be knotted here, and then it's got this, like, bib-looking thing going on. I think I can, yeah. But I'm home now, so free bird. Anyway, like I said, I did a job interview today, so if that pans out, I won't have as much time for videos, but I'll still try to get up, do at least one vlog a week. I'm sure I'll find time and energy. I just do. I'm that kind of person. Anyway, uh, yeah, so it's Friday, so this would be my review day. I think in the past I promised to talk about Fullmetal Alchemist. I'm not sure if I will today, just because he's showing everybody his butt. Attaboy. It's the nub. But I'm not so sure I'm going to talk about Fullmetal Alchemist just because it is, like I've said in the past, I think, that it is such a popular piece of media. But at the same time, I do kind of want to talk about it. Hey, Snuggles. Hey, Snuggle Boy. Okay. So I guess what I think about Fullmetal Alchemist, I adore it. Honestly, it is probably one of my favorite manga to read. Um, I don't have too many manga. Fullmetal Alchemist is certainly one of the most popular ones that I have and enjoy. It is definitely one of my top favorites, especially in the shonen genre. I really love the world building. I always love a not modern time period, but it's not necessarily medieval. Like, I really like when they don't necessarily go medieval. 'Cause, with a lot of like fantasy or um he's the kid. Um, fantasy or sci-fi, you tend to go either medieval, present, or vague future. So the fact that Full Metal Alchemist just kind of went like 1800s and stuck with it, it's just a really cool aesthetic, and it really makes sense for it just makes a very good setting for alchemy and stuff. And it also just doesn't rely on steampunk, which is another thing that, like if you go Victorian, everybody goes steampunk, but it's not Victorian either. It's just kind of got this very vague old-timey setting that's just very like aesthetically pleasing. I don't know how else to describe it. Because obviously they still have like guns, but they're not semi-automatics or like machine guns, which drive me insane, honestly. Don't usually, I prefer more unique weapons, Either that or like go full Ruby, everything's a gun. But like the problem I have with the guns in Ruby, which I mean, my problems with Ruby are a whole nother video. Uh, but the problem with the guns of Ruby is there's never any indication on what's going to be a legitimate bullet and what's going to be just like almost like a rubber bullet, like, or I don't know, a little power force just doing a knockback instead of a critical injury. So, like, that's the problem with the Guns and Ruby. One of the problems with the Guns and Ruby is just like they're not establishing whether or not these are lethal weapons or just stun guns. But, in Full Metal Alchemist, they are established to be normal guns on normal human bodies. It's just, it seems like it's a very well researched, what, like, made with love kind of series, and it shows. Um, I mean, and of course, since it is well, you can't say because a woman wrote it, it's very feminist, because that's not always true. You know, some women don't get it. But I think Hiromu Arakawa gets it, at least on some level. Um, Obviously, a lot of her female protagonists are very aesthetically pleasing. Of course, this is a shonen manga. But a lot of her male protagonists are also aesthetically pleasing. So, like, it is what it is. It's manga. Um, I don't expect too much out of it in that regard. But it's more the fact that the women are treated as people and think and act as people instead of as women. It's such a, and the humor is fabulous. The action is fantastic and quick. Like, it's not drawn out, and it's not people sitting there explaining their attacks and shit. Um, did I mention that I used to be big into Bleach? And that's where I get all my like Bleach and Naruto. I was into those for a long time. And that's where I kind of get this pickiness when it comes to action in manga and anime. Because, Bleach, they stop and have to explain all of their attacks. And then they also share this weakness with Naruto, or Naruto. Um, I fell out of the habit of pronouncing it correctly because everyone around me is always going, Naruto. It's Naruto. Um, but that one, Naruto has the weakness of also explaining attacks, but also suddenly going into extensive flashbacks mid battle. And it's like, I understand the need for history, but you should have established that before or after instead of in the middle of an action piece. Normally, I wouldn't complain about such a thing, but when you're marketing it in the shonen genre, with the shonen genre being very action based, it's like you wouldn't do that in an action movie, or at least if you do that in an action movie, it's going to interrupt the flow of the movie and just shake the tempo all to hell. They don't do that as much in Fullmetal Alchemist because it's not as action heavy, which I'm glad of personally because I mean fights and all are very fun and all, but and of course they're going to happen, but it's more important to me to see the characters interact with each other and develop. So that's part of why I enjoy Fullmetal Alchemist so much. Because even though there are action scenes, it's more reliant on character building and character interaction. And I really like the comedy like the specific brand of comedy that Hiromu Arakawa has. I also love um, something I'm not sure you get as much if you exclusively watch the anime is all the extras. Um, all the little extra funnies and comics and stuff in the back of the novel. She just has a fantastic, out of this world sense of humor. And some of the scenes that she chooses to poke fun at, it's just kind of like you sit there and you look at her and you're like, wow, nothing is sacred to you, even in your own series. And it's just kind of impressive in a way. Um, the comic in particular that I'm thinking of is when, so spoilers, excuse me, when Edward and Pinako are going to check the thing that he and Al transmutated, the human body they transmutated, thinking it was their mother. Um, they were digging up the body to really check if it was or not their mother. And in the comic they did that, but instead of picking up the hair and going, "It's black, our mother had brown hair," he picked it up. And it's the same picture from the original comic with Edward looking all tortured and just, saying what he is. But then there's a picture of Roy Mustang in the ground, missing a patch of hair, and he's going, "It's the Colonel!" And it's just one of those, that's the kind of scene where I sit there and I go, "Oh my god, you would really make fun of that moment." But I mean, when it's your own series, you can say what, it's better for you, bleh. It's easier for you to dictate the comedy when it's your own series as opposed to someone else's. I also just love the fact that in those comics, it kind of confirms that Scar is a cat lover, and I love Scar, so the fact that he's a cat lover is just like, oh, extra brownie points. And it's just, that's the kind of thing you don't get when you just exclusively watch anime. But of course, you get other stuff from anime, so I can't snub anime. I just don't really watch it anymore. Either way, this is the whole reason why I was kind of hesitant to talk about Full Metal Alchemist is I was really wondering how much I actually had to say, because mostly because I don't really have any complaints. So because I don't really have any complaints, it feels like I don't have as much to say, which is kind of embarrassing for me in that I only am I really the kind of person who only really speaks in complaints? That's terrible. Like I said, that's very embarrassing for me. I don't want to believe I'm that kind of person, but evidently I am. Yikes. Um, I guess my only real complaint with Full Metal Alchemist kind of just extends to anime and manga in general is that there's just this weird, almost like a Chinese stereotype that pervades anime and manga. Like, if you have a person who is implied to be Chinese in their series, they're always dressed very Chinese looking. And it's just like, why? They don't need to be, in my opinion. It does make sense within the sense of, or within the context of Full Metal Alchemist, in the sense that they had traveled over from Zing or Jing. I don't actually know how it's pronounced because I didn't get that far in the anime before I got bored and started watching something else. See, that's my problem. Either that or I just didn't. I just didn't want to watch it. Um, but either way, with the Jingi's characters, the they're all dressed, culturally. Um, and it makes sense, given that they traveled over the desert pretty much with just the clothes on their backs. Which you'd think they would have packed more, but it is what it is. But, they very rarely change clothes. Which, like I said, makes sense in context. Because you do actually see them in more Anglo style clothing later on in the series. So even my even my one complaint with Full Metal Alchemist is kind of moot because yeah, they do dress according to the occasion, and like I said, they're mostly just running around with the clothes on their backs because the main characters swap clothes plenty of time anyway. And that's something that I really appreciate in a series is they trust us to know the characters' faces and every body type, hair color. Like they draw them distinct enough that they can change the outfits and trust us to understand this is the same character, which is unfortunately not something you really see in magical girl anime, which is why everybody's like, well, why doesn't you like well, why don't they know she's Sailor Moon? She's got the same exact hairstyle, color, and length. And it's like, that's for the kids watching. Although, weirdly enough, with Sailor Moon, they did change their outfits a lot. They just never changed their hair styles or colors. So, that was interesting, actually, now that I think about it. Because, like, Sailor Moon and in the 90s anime, they had whole wardrobes and they would, like, even rewear certain items, and it really made them very unique in that aspect. And then I have to say, I do love the live action Sailor Moon because that they have their normal actresses. You can tell it's the natural hair of the actresses, and then when they go to Sailor Moon, they're wearing wigs, or when they power up, they're wearing wigs. I mean, but that's off topic. So that was something I appreciate about Full Metal Alchemist is that they would change the hairstyles and outfits and trust us to understand to know who's who. But she also had very distinct character designs, and she's just a very good artist. Hiromu Arakawa and her assistants, I think it's worth noting. You always have to give you should give more credit to the assistants because I'm fairly certain they did a lot in the way of like background and effect work, like drawing the cityscapes and the action lines and the doing the tones and shading. That's hard work, and I respect it. And they look gorgeous. I just also, like I said, have to really commemorate. I don't actually know if I'm saying that word right, so I'll just use a different word. I really have to salute her um, character distinctions, how distinct they all look from one another. Just her art style lends itself so well to doing a lot of different faces and still making them look like they belong in the same world. Like, that is very impressive to me. Probably because I'm not that good at it personally as an artist. Obviously, because I was a huge weeaboo in high school, uh, my drawing style is very anime-esque. But unfortunately, I have a bit of a same face syndrome. I tend, I do, um, I think a lot of my characters, if you took away their hair and clothing, would look very similar to each other, which I am not proud of, and I'm not putting the effort in to really work on that. I will admit that too. Just because, um, well, I'm not a comic book artist and I'm not trying to sell character art at this time, so it's not a high priority for me. I'm a hobbyist. I do the art for myself, and as long as I know which character's which, it's not terribly important to me that I make them look like as extremely distinct as they do in Full Metal Alchemist. I also have probably way more characters than she did in that story, and she had a lot of characters, but they were juggled well, I think, personally. But yeah, no, I really love Full Metal Alchemist, and the story is just top tier, top tier story writing. And again, with like, there aren't really any. Well, I guess I shouldn't say again because I think I'm switching topics, but there aren't really any moments where I sat there going, like, looking at plot holes. Like, she has a pretty airtight story. And I didn't really ever sit going, well, why didn't they do this? Or, well, this would have worked more effectively. Because just what she did just made so much sense with the characters and story. And it's just a gorgeously written series. Um, I guess my only issue is, again, spoilers, is when Envy pulls out his own Philosopher's Stone, effectively committing suicide. That always makes me physically uncomfortable. But, like, I'm not going to say it wasn't well written or anything like that. It did more or less make sense in the moment. Like, he just got so, I guess they got so frustrated, they just gave up and decided to peace out, Girl Scout, you know? I don't appreciate that. I think it was Edward ended up calling Envy a coward for that. I don't appreciate that. I don't think that's a good sentiment to attach to suicide. You know, it's not a coward's choice. It's somebody who cannot change their life in any meaningful way or feels like they cannot change their life in any meaningful way, and that's the only way they can see to change it in a drastic and immediate way. So when you apply that to Envy in their situation, it does make sense. You know, they were backed into a corner and they couldn't manipulate the people around them enough to regain power, and it was just kind of, I guess they were just done, sick of it all, and couldn't see another out. Especially because, you know, a lot of their siblings were dead at that point, and you could argue that the cause that they were fighting for was looking pretty bleak at that point. So it's just kind of like, it makes sense. It actually turns my stomach. And I think that a part of me is just because the scene impacts me to that point emotionally. So it's a very well written scene, I think. Well, within, except for the Edward comment, it is a fairly well written scene. A part of me wonders if that's really how Envy should have gone, but at the same time, it does make sense within context. It just makes me uncomfortable. I think it's more just because it was just such a pitiful, sad, stressful moment, you know? Like, Envy's just this little squib that's crying and freaking out and just at the end of its rope. Like, I guess that just impacts me very strongly emotionally. It's just hard to read/watch. So, I guess that's not really a complaint so much as like that's just something that impacted me very deeply. Which is funny because like there's all these I know it's kind of a meme online when you first get into Full Metal Alchemist and you get hit with what happened to uh I think her name was Nina, the little girl who got turned into a chimera and then murdered, and then Hughes's murder. Like those are kind of like the double whammy Full Metal Alchemist moments, but I'm past that personally. I mean, what happened to Nina? It's just like I'm since I've read it so often, I've kind of desensitized myself to it. It's just, oh, don't lay on my keyboard. Oh, you silly creature. I just kind of desensitized myself to that moment. It's still very upsetting. It's for me, it's psychologically upsetting than emotionally upsetting, which that's the best way I can explain it. Like in my head, a part of me knows I should be upset, but I'm just not. Um, Because, like, that's a horrible thing to do to a child. It's just horrible. I don't have any emotion attached to it personally. So that's just the kind of person I have. I also am like that with Hughes, I guess, because I do love Hughes as a character. I just didn't get as emotionally attached to him as it seems that a majority of the fan base does, or did, was, are. But that's just a personal opinion. I'm more attached to Roy. Actually, I was more attached to Havoc, if I'm completely honest. I was really pissed when he got paralyzed and, we didn't see him again for a long time. I was just like sitting there, go, bring back Havoc! I want Havoc back! And, maybe that makes me a shallow, heartless bastard human, but like, for everybody that loves Hughes, there's gotta be somebody who loves everybody else or likes different characters. That's, that's just how it is in the series. Um, yeah, I think that's about what I've got right now. I really did love Havoc. I'm kind of sad that he wasn't in, the big, um, he wasn't in the big finale that much because, he was paralyzed and living in the eastern region. Obviously, he was still featured, spoilers. Um, he was still featured and still very important to the cause. I was just also just like, let Havoc back. I don't know why I attached so strongly to Havoc of all characters. John Havoc. That's who I am as a person, I guess. But, um, I do have to say though, I am definitely I prefer Alphonse to Edward kind of person. Um, Winry is okay. I like her, but she's not my favorite. Love Hawkeye. Love Hawkeye. Uh, but I think I'm gonna wrap it up here because I'm kind of blanking out on what else I want to say. That isn't just me going, "Oh, I love it," over and over again. Which I think I pretty much did for 20 minutes. Woohoo! Hi, baby. Oh, you start falling. Okay, so um, righto. I hope y'all have a lovely day, and goodbye.